We do know from history that governments that use law enforcement at their beck and call are typically abusive governments, and that while he may have authority in that area, there's no historical precedent in a democratic government for a president or elected leader to direct law enforcement on what they can do or can't do in terms of criminal investigations. I mean, we have laws, the laws are passed, and the law enforcement is supposed to be independent and act independent. It would be quite bizarre if we had a president who was actively engaged in directing the attorney general on which cases to prosecute and whatnot. They can set broad policies, and they do. Obama set broad policies. But for him to get specifically involved and say, don't prosecute this man who hypothetically committed this crime because he happens to be my pal and also was working at my behest, and that might lead to me, Mr. Flynn, that would be. I mean, that's just beyond the realm, and that's why we're having this investigation, and that's why it's not going to stop.
Yeah, and
I mean, I think there actually is some precedent for a president interfering with an investigation, and it's the, I was 2 years old when this happened, but it was the Saturday Night Massacre. I mean, it was
right, and look what happened.
And look what happened as a result.
Right, the Saturday Night Massacre was, and I was a little older than 2, but what did he do? He ordered the Attorney General to fire the special counsel. The Attorney General was a very honorable man. He refused, so he fired the Attorney General. We're talking about Nixon and Elliot Richardson. He then fired the Deputy Attorney General because he refused. And then Bork, who is number 3 in line, agreed to do it because he's a soulless bastard. He agreed to do it, and he fired Cox. And there was such an uproar and that was a special counsel, such an outrage at the time that they ended up with another guy as the special counsel, a guy named Leon Jaworski, and who had been a prosecutor at Nuremberg. And he was not somebody to be taken lightly. I would say Mr. Mueller and Mr. Jaworski have a lot in common. Mr. Mueller is a combat veteran from Vietnam, and these are not wimpy dudes. Mr. Mr. Jaworski came on board, and there was no more Nixon nonsense after that. And so, yeah, I agree. I mean, it could happen here. Mueller could get fired, and we could play that out if you want, Jimmy. I mean, you know what's going to happen if he gets fired.
And we can go that route in a little bit. I mean, I've seen your, and it's not just your belief that potentially he could be brought on by either the New York State Attorney General or some other Attorney General's office to continue an investigation, but that would be of state charges. I don't believe they would have jurisdiction to investigate Russian collusion or possible that it would be state crimes.
Right, and there are a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of lapse. We are a lot of cases that can be filed and are filed in state court, and then the feds pick them up because they get excited about it. So there's lots of crimes that can be filed in either federal or state court. And my understanding is that Mr. Mueller is a number of chess moves ahead of anybody on the Trump team, and that knowing that he can be fired, that long ago, he began communicating with the Attorney General of the state of New York, because that's where they suspect most of the criminal activity occurred based on whatever evidence they have, and we don't know what it is. And that there's been a communication, an open line of communication between them. And it's probably good for the audience to know Mr. Trump's power and authority in terms of Mueller. He can fire him by ordering the Attorney General to fire him, like the Saturday Night Massacre. That can occur, and Mr. Mueller could be fired. The other thing that Mr. Trump can do, President Trump, I hate calling him that, but okay. The other thing that President Trump can do is he can grant pardons to everybody on federal crimes. So if Mr. Mueller prosecutes everybody, he gets them all convicted, Trump can wait till all that happens and go, "You're pardoned. You're pardoned. You're pardoned. Sprinkle some water on you. You're pardoned." And he can do that. He has complete authority to do it. But what he can't do is, and you know this, I'm just talking to the audience, is that Trump's ability to grant pardons only goes to federal crimes. It doesn't go to state crimes. And his ability to fire a prosecutor only goes to federal prosecutors. So what I've read is that there's been an alignment between the state's attorney general's office in New York, who parenthetically is a Democrat, and they have been in communication because there's both state and federal crimes that they're investigating against the various people that are subjects of this investigation, and that if in fact Trump were to fire Mueller, there's absolutely nothing in his team. There's nothing that would preclude the Attorney General from the state of New York from turning around and going, okay, I now hire you to work for the state of New York, and instead of pursuing federal charges, you guys now have an opportunity to be charged in state court and go to state prison and see how you like them apples. See if you like going to Sing Sing and the places like that in the state of New York, and see if you like Rikers Island, Mr. Kushner and Don Jr. You'll have a great time in Rikers Island getting to know the fellas.
But could they pursue Trump though? I don't think that the.
I think it's a whole different area.
That's a whole different question.
You've got constitutional questions there about whether, again, you come back to whether or not a sitting president can be indicted.
Yeah, it's never happened.
It's never happened. And
I don't think it would happen here.
I don't think it would either.
I think that would be a bridge a little too far.
Well, and I think if a Democratic state attorney general tried to indict a Republican president.
No, I don't think it's going to happen.
I think you'd have some real problems.
Here's what I think will happen, though, is since you asked me.
That's why you're here. You're here to give your thoughts.
Sorry, David. I'll be quiet in 10 minutes and not speak again, because I said all I have is
Julio's got to jump into
I know that's not true.
I'm listening, man. I'm just listening.
Sorry. Well, here's what I think will happen regarding Trump, because this is an interesting question, and I don't think that they would try to indict Trump. They may have plenty of evidence, but what they could do, whether it's in federal court or state court, and let's play it out in federal court, because that's where we're still at, is they come back with a conspiracy charge based on all that they get from Flynn and the corroborating evidence, and there's going to be a lot, I think.
We'll get into that next.
And I think there's going to be a whole world that we don't even know about. I don't think there's all kinds of stuff out there, and I think there's going to be a conspiracy charge that's going to include a number of different individuals. And the way that Trump can be involved in that without being indicted is he can be named, as you know, and you guys know, he can be named in the indictment but not indicted.
Or as the generic unindicted
co-conspirator. I mean, the President of the United States, unindicted co-conspirator, Donald Trump Sr., Donald John Trump. I mean, he's a named co-conspirator but not indicted, and then the world gets to know what the investigation believes occurred, and that would give ammunition, if you will, to the Congress and the Senate and the American people to make a decision about, well, what do we do about Mr. Trump?